This House is now in session. Minutes of the meeting held on 25th of January 2019 and Tuesday 29th of January 2019.
Held on Friday 25th of January 2019 and Tuesday 29th January 2019 be deferred.
Question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General. Petitions, papers.
Commanded to lay the representation of the people, representation of electors, amendment regulations 2019. I'm further commanded to lay the Barbados Revenue Authority Annual Report 2017.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded to lay the Barbados Prison Service Annual Report 2017.
Government notices, private members notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills. Reports from select committees.
Where is it? Where is it? Select committees. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the report of the Standing Orders Committee. Yeah. All right, no, I guess not.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Supreme Court of Judicature Amendment Bill 2019.
Beg to second that, sir.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read here first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are so suspended.
PS has to go to the police officer funeral. I can't get it.
So you're going to lead off on this bill, right? What are you doing, sir?
Public business, sir.
Government business? Government business is now the order of the day.
Order number 7, sir. In the name of the Honorable Attorney General, of a resolution to adopt the report of the Standing Orders Committee.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, while the matter of the Standing Orders amendment is not something that would ordinarily engage for too long the attention of Parliament by way of a substantive debate, there are times, sir, when the standing orders themselves are altered so as to completely transform existing processes. What we're doing today, this morning, sir, is not changing a word here or a word there, correcting a phrase or a clause. What we're doing represents another step in a process of transparency and openness in government as it relates to how government manages its finances and the budgetary process. I don't know that 15 years is a long time, but just about 15 years ago, I had the honor to be elected to this chamber. And one of the exercises that we've engaged in every year has been that of the estimates. And for many Barbadians, the estimates is just an exercise in a whole set of speeches by every parliamentarian covered on television. Well, for others who are interested enough in government budgeting, it represents or it represented a very limited opportunity for the public to have an understanding of how we're spending the people's money. I believe that there are members in this chamber who would well recollect that in our estimates process, the first 3 days are spent with speeches by every parliamentarian. And those speeches range far and wide. Sometimes they don't even deal with the estimates themselves. And perhaps I'm guilty too, sir, because I've taken the opportunity of the estimates to complain that my roads need fixing, that the polyclinic in Horse Hill needs attention, that the infrastructure in St. Joseph is falling apart, that there's no water. I hope that the relevant ministers take a hint, because those things still exist. And then in the last 2 days, Mr. Speaker, the House resolves itself into committee, and we then begin to look at the dollars and cents as are set out in that 2-inch thick volume called the Estimates of Revenue and Expenditure. But there have been times, Mr. Speaker, when across those 2 days, Parliament could end up talking about foreign affairs, and that's important too. We can talk sometimes about some of the ministries that don't generally generate a lot of discourse. But the vast majority of government finances is left untouched by the debating process. It is a known strategy that sometimes the government has chosen to debate very limited, non-controversial heads, and so steered the entire estimates discourse away from getting into the minutiae of government programming. In other words, the government has been able to so skew the debate by calling heads that are uncontroversial, and thereby keep the controversial heads away from debate and deep scrutiny. from the time we were last in government, we began to reflect on the fact that the way in which we have been doing our estimates debate does not really lead to accountability on the part of the ministers and on the part of the public officers in their ministry. And one of the reasons it doesn't lead to accountability is simply because it might just not get discussed. And equally, when the minister makes his presentation, the members on the other side in their own 15-minute presentation has the opportunity to ask a variety of questions. And invariably, sir, especially in the last administration, every member in that government would get up and spend the entire speech praising themselves and patting themselves on the back. I well remember it. I'm sure member for St. Thomas will remember speech after speech after speech. I want to congratulate the Honourable Minister for bringing these wonderful estimates that are going to transform the Barbadian landscape, blah, 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 blah. And we on the other side in opposition will get up and criticize, and then somebody else get up and say, I want to congratulate the Honourable. It really became a farce. And if we recognized it here, there is absolutely no doubt that the people on the outside recognized it. If there's one thing about this current administration, sir, is that so far we have not refused an opportunity to grapple with issues of accountability, transparency, and openness, and grapple with making this institution of Parliament more relevant to people's day-to-day living. We have, in recent weeks, enacted a new public finance bill. We can now call it an act because it has been passed by both houses. And that Public Finance Act, sir, demands of ministries, departments, and public servants full disclosure and accountability. And a lot of it is directed towards the estimates. Because in that Public Finance Act, every single government department, every single ministry has to lay as part of the estimates what their plan is for the next year, what their budgetary requirements are. They have to go into detail that hitherto was not gone into. So if you looked at the estimates now, sir, you will see a government department and they would have these nice long tables. This is what statutory expenses and this is the program budget. So you would see that RDC only got $500,000 to actually do work. But nowhere do they tell you what it is that they intend to do with the $5,000 and then. But our new public finance bill now requires every single department of government to go into great detail about what they intend to achieve and how, and what the revenue sources are in the coming year. But sir, what is the point of requiring that level of detail in the actual estimates document if ministers and their senior public officers are not going to be compelled to come and defend their program? So, sir, amending the standing orders represents another step in that transparency. So, in the coming estimates debate, Mr. Speaker, ministers will be responsible each. They have half an hour going to be doing in their program. Absolutely new is that minister must now leave his chair and sit in what we call the well of the chamber, that is the space between the two front benches. Normally we would say between the front benches of the opposition, but the two front benches, no, sir, and the leader of the opposition. And the minister will move to that space and be joined by his permanent secretary or permanent secretaries and his senior staff. And then an inquisitorial process will begin. And ministers, backbenchers, everybody in the chamber will have a period of 3 minutes to pose questions to the minister and or to his public servants about the details of the program. So when I have the opportunity and the Ministry of Health is there, I would want to direct the question to the permanent secretary about why there is nothing in the estimates for the refurbishment of the Horse Hill Polyclinic. And if there is nothing in the estimates for the Horse Hill Polyclinic, then can I expect to see something done about the Horse Hill Polyclinic? And why is it reasonable to spend $36 or $40 million on the St. John Polyclinic and more, and a small place in Horse Hill? This morning, sir, this morning, old people are sitting outside because the polyclinic opened late. But I now have the opportunity to do that. And other members, member for St. Lucy, might ask the member for Christchurch West, why roads in St. Lucy can't get fixed. I will say what the opposition will do, but I'm sure that he's looking forward to the opportunity to engage in a more realistic way with the government on its programs. Because now each of us will fall under a public microscope and be compelled to defend for the world to see what our program is. So the era, the past decades of near sterile speeches and empty congratulatory remarks has come to an end. We, I suppose, are fortunate in this administration to have all save one, and people keep saying that that's not true, that we actually still have that one, but all save one of the seats. But can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, if the last administration had been forced to defend themselves against the kind of opposition bench with the depth of knowledge and the skills in debating that would have existed on the opposition benches up to May 24th. It would not have been so easy, Mr. Speaker, for a minister responsible for the environment and sanitation. It would not have been so easy for them to get away with not explaining to this chamber why and how a contract could have been entered into with a company named Cahill, and that there could be no tender process. Because for the first time, that minister and his staff will be standing there or sitting there and be accountable to defending their program. This is not novel. It is practiced in Jamaica. And in fact, as I understand it in our research, the actual estimates are debated over, are delved into over a 2-week period. We are limiting ours to a 1-week period. But that perhaps has to do with the size of our parliament and the size of our budget. It is also done in Trinidad, I understand. So that we are now getting to the place where some of our Caribbean brothers and sisters have gone. Mr. Speaker, members from the other place who happen also to be in cabinet will also be capable of being summoned to this chamber to defend what they're doing as well. You would know, Mr. Speaker, that by the Westminster traditions, a member from the other place, whether in cabinet or otherwise, has no right of audience in this chamber. But obviously we have ministers of government who are in the other place, and these standing orders, as we've amended them, will now require them to come to this chamber and defend what it is that they're doing. Now, Mr. Speaker, I support these amendments wholeheartedly. There's always a time, sir, when you recognize that what you've been doing, as comfortable as it may have been, that the time for that has passed. And in part, Mr. Speaker, it is another step in the accountability and transparency initiative of this administration. But it is a step, sir, the time for which is ripe and mature. We have an electorate that before the journalists will show up, there's a picture of an event on Facebook. Something gets tweeted, something else on Instagram. Perhaps one of the single greatest focal points, other than what people are having for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, is what we as politicians do, and such things are covered immediately on social media. The Minister of the Blue Economy and myself just had a recent brush with social media, and it demonstrates fairly clearly, sir, that people don't always hold us in the high regard that we think they should. But if what we do is going to be examined on social media, whether accurate or not, then surely we must feel that we are obligated as a rational part of that movement for knowledge to ensure that the processes of Parliament are open and relevant. I do not know the days, Mr. Speaker, personally, when the visitors' gallery was full, but there are some here who would say to you that they might have been in those packed visitors' galleries in the days when Tom Adams and Errol Barrow were in full flight. In a sense, sir, Parliament has taken on an aura of irrelevance to most Barbadians. It is an interesting thing and I'm sure it happens to my colleagues, you meet somebody in the street and they say, "Who you is again? You look familiar." You look familiar. But I well recollect, sir, that as a young man, any member of Parliament passing within 50 feet of me was immediately recognized. There was no question about who you is again. But in those days, sir, those parliamentarians didn't have Facebook pages. They didn't have Instagram accounts. You didn't have CBC running long hours. You didn't have all them newspapers. As Melvin St. Thomas said, yeah, the electricity, so TV didn't help one way or another. But isn't it strange, Mr. Speaker? Isn't it strange? Isn't it strange, and doesn't it tell you about the relevance of this institution, that in an era past, every Bajan boy or girl recognized immediately who the members of the political class were? While today, when we are so much in their faces, people would look at the member for the city and say, "You used to be in the army, right?" But they don't recognize him as being the stellar member of Parliament for the city. And it speaks, I maintain, to how people feel about the institution of Parliament. Now, we either recognize that it is our duty not just to stand in here and engage in debates on a weekly basis, but it is our duty to carry Parliament back into the lives of the average Barbadian. Perhaps not to the way it used to be. And the idea of getting people to come into the gallery, well, why do that when Parliament is streamed? But we will only become relevant, sir, if the way in which we do things serve to regenerate the interest in what we do. Mr. Speaker, there's another element to this amendment, because we have to recognize that a lot of things are also being done electronically. And we have a process of laying bills and so on in the chamber, which is paper intensive and does not take into account the digital age. And so the Speaker, Mr. Speaker, your clerk at the table and his deputies will know of a particular bill that is to come. They may even have seen a copy of it, but unless and until that paper shows up in this chamber from the Cabinet Office, it cannot be laid in Parliament. Last night I emailed to the Leader of the House a piece of legislation that has been laid today that we want to debate today in all its stages. But I had to email it to him with the words, courtesy copy. And that's what I wrote. Please find a courtesy copy of the bill, of the draft bill. And I emailed it to the clerk also as a courtesy copy, but there was nothing he could do with it until that physical 8 pages showed up here in an envelope from the Cabinet Office. Now, Mr. Speaker, we're doing things instantaneously across the globe, but yet still somehow figure that our Parliament needs to have its feet stuck firmly in the dark ages. So one of the amendments to this bill is to allow for electronic laying of documents, so that the moment Cabinet approves it, I can email it to the Leader of the Opposition. He doesn't have to wait until he gets here, and neither me nor the member of St. Peter would have to bear his wrath anymore because he only got the bill 10 seconds before. That hopefully will be a thing of the past, but now we will be able to lay the bills electronically. But equally, sir, we are completing the preparation of the estimates. And we expect to lay those estimates on next Tuesday when Parliament meets. But that is a very paper-intensive process, and the document is not likely to be available at that time, simply because to print and bind all these copies of that 2-inch document is a bit of a challenge. But in no means that we'll be able to lay it electronically and circulate it to members electronically, so that whether paper comes or paper don't come, sir, the proper business of Parliament will have been carried out. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to a new set of engagements. I look forward to a healthy repartee with the Leader of the Opposition when he forces us to defend what we've committed to do. But that, sir, is not to be seen as an adversarial process. It isn't. It is a healthy engagement, which is exactly what Parliament is intended to engender. And I don't expect the Leader of the Opposition to go easy on us. He doesn't do it now. He doesn't do it now. But whatever name he calls himself, whatever political party he remains affiliated with, he has a duty, sir, on behalf of his entire constituency and the constituents beyond, to probe in the most incisive of ways what the government is proposing to do with the public expenditure. And this gives him the opportunity to do it. I hope, sir, it will be 15 years before any of the members of this side have to have recourse to that particular exercise. But if there's one thing it teaches you, Mr. Speaker, is that this opposition is not afraid for the future. Because a lot of the things that we have put in place are things that people have been saying to us, but what you going to do this? What happens when you become, why would you do this to yourself? Why not take the easy way out? You really want to open up everything that your ministry is going to do to the public and to the leader of the opposition? Why do that? Well, sir, when we were in government last, we enacted a piece of legislation to deal with public accounts. And it gave the public accounts a vast set of powers. And we did it early in our last term. And people asked, why you want to do that? We did it because it was the right thing to do. It meant, of course, that a prudent opposition should have and would have been able to use the very rules that we had put in place against us. But we didn't care about that then. Nor do we care now about the fact that it opens us up to greater scrutiny. Because what we are committed to doing is the right thing and for the right reasons. Mr. Speaker, I urge all members to support this particular report and to support and approve the amendments to the standing orders of the House. And one final word, sir. There are, I think, probably about 17 new parliamentarians in this chamber. That is the majority of the parliamentarians in this chamber. And so they will never have gone through an exercise in the estimates before. So it is really a good thing to introduce a sea change like this at the start of their political career. And many of them are in cabinet for the first time as well, and for the only, so far. And it also gives them an opportunity, sir, to face this important occasion with the right tools and to approach it in the right way. And I believe that this will, as hard as it might be, and some of them may feel a little bit intimidated about that inquisitorial process, but it will make for better governance in the long run, and it will also make them, each one of them, and each one of us, sir, a better member of cabinet for as long as we have the opportunity to so serve. I support these amendments, and I urge that all members of this chamber support the amendments to the standing orders. I'm obliged. So formally, sir, I move that the report of the Standing Orders Committee be adopted.
Second that.
I reserve the right to speak.
I reserve the right to speak, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to join this debate in support of the member for St. Joseph, who just gave the synopsis and indeed details as to why indeed we have prepared this report seeking to amend the standing orders. And Mr. Speaker, I wish to give as my preamble the whole aspect of management in the private sector, my former life. And indeed, it's a life where it taught us to be transparent. Well, it taught me to be ethical. It taught me to be disciplined. It taught me to be prudent. and it taught me to operate with a high level of accountability for whatever resources I had to manage in that former life. And Mr. Speaker, coming to public life, it is something that I sat on the other side where the member for St. Michael North West is occupying presently. That was my seat in opposition. And many days, Mr. Speaker, I sat in anger, in humiliation, in disgust, in distress at the way indeed the public funds were indeed managed, the way in which the government at the time displayed somewhat a lackluster duty of care for the assets, for the affairs of this country. And the words that some members would use to describe what we engaged in over the last 5 years: zestless, insipidity, or insipid nature of debates. We indeed, as an opposition, had to endure. Well, it was my first time, and I know the member for St. Joseph would have endured it probably for 10 years. But some of us, the member for the city, the member for St. James North, the member for St. Michael Southeast, sometimes the member for Christchurch West, we all sat in amazement and asked ourselves if this is really what Parliament is about. And many a times we had to draw on the shoulders of the said member for St. Joseph and the member for St. James Central, who counsel us and ask us to be strong. It will come to an end. And indeed the opposition leader, because we could not imagine that the government at the time behaved in such callous, behave in such a way as if they thought that the taxpayers' money were indeed theirs and they can do what they like. And I wish to carry on from the member for St. Joseph who spoke about the estimates debate and why we are seeking to amend these standard orders, and why I give it my full support, because in my preamble I spoke about the high level of transparency, the high level of accountability. We are seen as leaders by our public. People went to the polls and they voted for us unanimously. And here we have 30 members, well 29 less one, I still think he's part of us. He behaves that way at times. And we are here having to give true account, operate with a duty of care, operating with a high level of transparency. And you can see from day one, when we became the government of the day, what our mission and our focus was: to ensure that we put this country back on track, and to ensure that our citizens and our taxpayers are treated with respect, and that when we seek to take up the taxpayers' money, that a high level of transparency and accountability and zero corruption becomes the order of the day. And, Mr. Speaker, amending these standing orders and the new modus operandi that we will engage in within our estimates come weeks from now has warmed my heart, and indeed it has warmed the hearts of the people of St. George South, because I speak on their behalf in this chamber. Someone asked me, what is estimates in St. George South? And I explained to them what the estimates really are about. And I also explained to them only 2 days ago, to encourage them to tune in, that we will be operating at a totally different level. with a duty of care that is beyond what they saw by the last administration. We'll be transparent, and we as ministers will be accountable for every cent we spend in our ministries. And indeed, they said, yes, is that true? So what happened in the past? I tell them, forget the past. Forget the past. Focus on what is happening now and our mandate to ensure that you, the citizens of this country, are indeed given all the relevant information as to how government is being run and how government ought to be run. And this brings me to the whole aspect of supplementaries. And indeed, the honorable member would have mentioned the whole aspect of accountability and transparency. But we, again, and I have to recall it, I'm not focusing on the negatives, but using the past to show you why we ought to amend our standing orders. Many a times we come into this honorable chamber as opposition members and we are faced with minimum numbers. We are in the minority, and supplementary on top of supplementary come into this chamber, and we as opposition in the minority, as a result of the standing orders as well, we are forced to accept the mismanagement, because supplementaries are when you go and you overspend and you spend money that have not been allocated in the estimates. Then you come to this chamber requesting the approval of the cost overruns. And indeed, that is what happened the last 5 years. And we can speak about it. The honorable member for St. Joseph and St. James Central and St. Thomas, St. Michael North, they can tell you week after week after week when they meet, because they never met too often. And when we met in this chamber, nearly every single week of their meeting would have been a supplementary to approve the last administration, the Democratic Labour Party. Thank you, member for St. James Central, being specific so that those who are listening would know that I'm speaking about the last administration. Thank you, sir. Because supplementary after supplementary, when they met, approval coming after the fact of how you would have taken up, for example, spend $700,000 at Barbados Water Authority. Indeed, to bring in parks, to fix maintenance equipment, whatever they are, I don't want to get into the details. But as a result, you are not able to tell this country and the taxpayers why you spent that money, and indeed did not even bring a park to this country. I'm so glad and I'm happy that the leader of this government, the member for St. Michael Northeast, she has seen the wisdom, and indeed we articulated it in opposition, that we will change the way business is being done and the way this country is being run. Because what was happening, you were doing things the same way for the past 10 years and getting the same result, which was no growth, which was dissatisfied citizens of this country, unhappy citizens of this country, high unemployment. And I'm glad that the member for St. Michael Northeast has seen the light and has seen the wisdom, and indeed making us accountable. I'm not afraid of it. Coming and sitting in this hollow section here to answer to the people of this country as to why I am asking for $2 or $3 or $4 million to indeed improve small business in this country, and indeed to make sure that commerce plays a role in terms of economic development in this country. I have no difficulty sitting and answering those questions. I have no difficulty bringing my public officers, and in the past, the public officers indeed were not held accountable for the spending of funds or the cost overruns. And I don't think it's their fault. It is how the government was structured. So I can't stand in this lower chamber, in all honesty, and blame the public servants. I have to blame the leadership of the last administration. And I know when this is told to the public servants, some of them know already. And those who know, I can tell you, they're excited because they want the opportunity to come to Parliament to let people know that they're not just sitting in the ministries twiddling their thumbs, that they are indeed managing the ministry and indeed providing good guidance and good advice to us ministers. So, Mr. Speaker, I feel very passionate about this change. And I have asked the people of St. George South, whom I have met this week, to tune in. Because I don't know if my ministry will be called. I don't know if I have to sit in this section. But indeed, whichever ministry or ministries sit right here to be questioned on the estimates, they will have some relation to the people of St. George South. Whether it is the Ministry of Transport and Works, whether it is the Ministry of Agriculture, whether it is the Ministry of Energy and Water Resource Management, whether it is the Ministry of Tourism, People Empowerment, the youth, the creative economy, housing, and indeed every single member in this chamber.
Not the blue economy though.
And the blue economy as well. Yes, St. George, we can have businesses. We don't have a C, but we have businesses that we can benefit. Small businesses, my mantra and the order of the day. And there are many small businesses that we indeed can create to enhance the blue economy and indeed add value to this economic development. So the blue economy also, I would like my people, thank you, the member for St. Michael's South. So every single ministry impacts the people of St. George South in a meaningful way. And I want to pledge my support as I close, Mr. Speaker, to the amendment of these standing orders that will bring a greater level of transparency, a greater level of accountability, and indeed high on the priority list to stamp out corruption. And transparency and how you account for the taxpayers' money in a meaningful way and a high duty of care is the order of day for this government. And I want to thank, in closing, the member for St. Michael North East, the Prime Minister of this country, for her leadership in championing this change. And I want to thank the member for St. Joseph indeed in laying this in this house and indeed sparking this discussion that I know will engage many members in this Lord Chamber. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Our member for St. James Central.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would wish to have an opportunity to make a small input into this debate, sir, and to associate myself unequivocally with the comments made by the honourable member who just took his place, and of course the learned Attorney General of Barbados who moved this bill. Mr. Speaker, sir, I do not propose to detain the House unduly long because I am committed to have a couple of meetings with some potential investors who have recognized the urgency of the hour and who are prepared to stand shoulder to shoulder with this government in our undying efforts to continue the transformation of the economic landscape of Barbados. But it would be remiss of me, Mr. Speaker, sir, not to draw the nexus between that which I leave this place to go to do and that which this bill speaks to. Because, Mr. Speaker,
resolution.
We are here.
I remember. This resolution.
Resolution, I beg your pardon, sir. We are here, Mr. Speaker, sir, because of a commitment to roll back, to push back the frontiers of parliamentary abuse. The frontiers, Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't like to loosely use the word corruption, but malpractice springs to mind. Malfeasance, those things which we saw particularly over the course of the last 10 years, Mr. Speaker. And that is not just to lambaste in a political way, but that is to speak truth to that which used to be power. The honourable member who just took his place, the member for St. George South, made the point that time after time, year after year, Mr. Speaker, sir, during the annual estimates debate of revenue and expenditure of Barbados, we bore witness to the human tragedy that was being unfolded before our eyes when members of this place came here with intent formed so that they could shield the government of the day from interrogation. We saw, Mr. Speaker, sir, a week reserved for a debate on the estimates of Barbados, which is really the financial management of the country, the true budget of the country, Mr. Speaker, sir, because that which takes place when the Minister of Finance comes and the so-called budget is not the real budget of the country. That is the minister making certain interventions into the management of the country in a fiscal way. But the actual budget, sir, prescribed under the Constitution of Barbados as an annual exercise is the estimates of revenue and expenditure. And we saw the tragedy, as the learned Attorney General puts it, of government shielding ministries from public scrutiny. At a time, Mr. Speaker, sir, when we knew that at the forefront of the minds of the population, there were issues that cried out for address, and yes, even redress. And Mr. Speaker, sir, lest we forget, let me give you a particular example. Because the Public Accounts Committee was also part of an exercise where we had to try to deal with some of these matters. The one that springs readily to mind is the movement of money from the Ministry of Finance to the National Housing Corporation to the tune of $24 million, Mr. Speaker, sir, and nobody knew anything about it. And the reason why one was not able to interrogate the Minister of Finance on it in a structured way, sir, is because that which we now propose did not exist. The requirement of placing a minister, the same minister, sir, let us not forget, did not see fit to appear in front of the Public Accounts Committee. But no minister of woman born will now be able to say that she or he is not going to be sitting in the well of the House and be accountable to the members of the House who are sent here by the sovereign people of this country in an effort to ensure that there is transparency of the exercise of governance. Those days, sir, must forever come to an end. We sat in this place in an estimates exercise, Mr. Speaker, sir, and challenged the then Minister of Health. Members will recall on this side that we challenged the Minister of Health as he then was on matters relating to the complete closure of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital for all business except for emergency surgery, on the basis of the fact that there was no money available to do some of the elementaries. Surgeons complaining, sir, doctors complaining, nurses complaining, no access to gauze, bandages, toilet paper, you name it. And Mr. Speaker, sir, there will always be instances, and I dare say even now, where the hospital will have challenges. But the fact of the matter is, sir, there must be a transparency in the public exercise of government and governance. There must be, sir, an opportunity to sit the minister and his technical advisor and have a discussion with them so that you can drill down to granular detail as to what is going wrong in this particular sector and why. But for government to use its overwhelming numbers to shield from public scrutiny ordinary citizens of the state, so that, or rather shield from public scrutiny and the inquiring eye of ordinary citizens of the state, to shield the members of the executive, so that the ordinary inquiring eye of the average member of the state cannot be brought to bear on them and that which they are doing, or in the case of the last administration, failing to do, sir, is grossly unsatisfactory. And so what this exercise is all about, and the reason why I give it my wholehearted and unequivocal support, is because, yet again, it transforms government. It is yet another step by a very young government in transforming the way in which government is conducted in Barbados. We did not just talk about it, sir. We came into office and have started to deliver. Mr. Speaker, sir, the fact of the matter is that, you know, there are some ministries, as in the last administration, which never once were able to be debated in this House and estimates time because of the fact that the minister was located elsewhere. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is one such example. What we now intend to be able to do, once this is given the blessing of the House, is that this House can send for a minister in the other place. And the minister of the other place is not empowered to say, no, I ain't coming, like how they said they will not go to the Public Accounts Committee. But the minister of the other place must come here and be inquired into, and his ministry inquired into, or inquired after, once he is here, Mr. Speaker, sir. And he can't just come, got to bring his top technical advisor with him. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we know that that which I speak of is true, that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for 10 years escaped the scrutiny of this Parliament, of this House, because the Minister of Foreign Affairs was located elsewhere. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we also know that for a number of years, plural, an ambassador in the last government was renting a hotel room because accommodation was not made available to suit the ambassador. The Parliament of Barbados, sir, where elected men and women sat, could not discuss this issue without it going outside the bounds of relevance. Because anybody sitting in your chair, Mr. Speaker, sir, can rein in a speaker and say, honourable member, what is the relevance of that? So the point is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this is about shining the light of scrutiny on matters which otherwise would evade scrutiny. And that is the transformational nature of that which we are doing today. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I also want to say that, again, part and parcel of any discussion of this nature must be the financial affairs of the country in the strictest sense of their management. And that means management by the Minister and the Ministry of Finance. And it is a happy thing that we have a Minister of Finance, sir, who is prepared to hold her feet to the fire and the feet of those ministers in her ministry as well, and to be accountable in the way that this Minister of Finance is prepared to be accountable. And hopefully, Mr. Speaker, sir, we will never again see the dawn of the days which we left behind, when, sir, the Central Bank Act of Barbados, which is Cap 323C of the laws of this country, sir, were treated as though it did not exist. And the Central Bank Act making provisions, sir, as it does for a governor in circumstances where there is a concern about the phenomena which we came to know as the printing of money, to make representation not only to the Minister of Finance, but for that representation, sir, to be tabled on the floor of this House. But Mr. Speaker, sir, though those things existed in law, the ability once again to drill down into the affairs of the Ministry of Finance were not there, because the Minister of Finance only needed to be possessed of a glib tongue, to be fast on his feet in terms of his verbal footwork. But Mr. Speaker, sir, not being necessarily willing to be transparent and accountable in process. But now, he got to present himself, or she has to present himself, and any others coming hereafter will have to present themselves on the well of the House, together with a permanent secretary. And yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, let us understand the extent of the importance of bringing this part in, bringing the permanent secretary with you. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, sir, that it is an incontrovertible fact that there were budgets read in this House of Assembly that did not have technical input from within the Ministry of Finance? You know that, Mr. Speaker, sir? But I want to see the permanent secretary. No. Who can come here and sit down and say that, well, that which was presented, they collide with the Director of Finance and Economic Affairs, or they collide with the people in the debt management unit, or wherever, Mr. Speaker, sir? So what we are asking for, not just asking, what we are ensuring can now be delivered is a broader basis in law for there to be that which we all seek after in Barbados, and that is accountability in the management of the public's affairs. That is why this is important, and we are not the first to take this step in the Caribbean. And that is another reason why I'm proud to be associated with this government on this matter, Mr. Speaker, sir. Because a government that takes itself seriously must search around to identify best practices. It would be the easy way to travel to say, man, you got a 30-0 majority. Don't mind one drop off, you got a 29-1 majority. And not much that one can say can resonate. So smooth sailing. Go along for 5 years. Why change anything that might, in theory, affect yourself and your best interests? Well, that's what any normal wrong thinking, but any normal political actionary would want to do. Because you can say, well, look, let me try and look out for my little corner here. No, it's good. Plain sailing. It is the path of greatest resistance, however, that we have chosen, which says, look, notwithstanding the excellent batting wicket that we have, notwithstanding the fact that you know that the umpire on the other end half blind, so he can't see much to call you on, you are going to go for cameras. You're going to go for replays. You're going to go for all those things that constitute checks and balances in the system to make sure that that greater ideal of the public good is being satisfied. And that is where this government has gone. So therefore, sir, we did not content ourselves with business as usual, but we made it our business to look around the Caribbean. The Clerk of Parliament, if he were able to speak in this debate, would tell you that precedent followed and explored has come from Jamaica, has come from Trinidad and Tobago. And interestingly enough, you know, Mr. Speaker, sir, I continue to say to those who have ears to hear and are inclined to listen that, you know, sometimes out of hardship can evolve those things that may serve you best, those practices that may serve you best. You know why Jamaica has gone this route, sir? Or why Trinidad and Tobago went that route? Because they had to come to the painful understanding that financial mismanagement, financial recklessness and lawlessness was costing their country. They paid a heavy, heavy price. Jamaica still pays it to this day, even though all the statisticians will tell you that they are on their way up and out of the difficulty. But the value of their dollar is 130 Jamaican dollars to one United States dollar. Think about it long and hard, Mr. Speaker. So I can come in this part and talk about that a little bit later in the context of tourism too. Because I want you to understand what that means in terms of wages and their ability to compete. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, that after having had to go through what is literal hell financially, they had to work out and figure out a way to make sure that that which passed for government and governance in Barbados for the last 10 years could not happen in their country. And likewise, sir, our duty, having been vested with the level of confidence that we were invested, that was invested in us on the 24th or 25th of May, whichever day it was, last year, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we can't turn our back on that voice of confidence, as some would glibly do, to sit in a seat of cushioned ease. We have to face the reality of hard work and look around to see how can you make the difficulties in Barbados that are so severe better. How can you transform this country from where it is, and how can you find rules which will ensure that that which happened before cannot happen again. And that is the reason why, Mr. Speaker, sir, this transformatory resolution is before this House. It empowers, Mr. Speaker, sir, the House to sit as a committee of the whole House. And as a committee of the whole House, even though it is treated as a subcommittee, all of we in here, let's put it very bluntly, Abidjan, have a right now to say to a minister, including one of our own, in circumstances such as these, the honourable member for Christchurch South, who is not in the cabinet, is not to be seen, or the member for St. Philip North, who is not in the cabinet, is not to be seen as the only people. Colleagues, Mr. Speaker, the member for St. George South has a right to ask of his ministerial colleague any question that helps him to come to a better understanding of precise and specific issues that are impacting on the folks in his constituency. And I, Mr. Speaker, sir, have a right, therefore, to look forward to the day when my colleague, the member for Christchurch West, or the member for St. Lucie, sits down in the well of the House, so that I can ask them to explain what the people in West Road, Fitzvillage do then. That they can't get a good road to walk on. That is all we ask for. But the time will come when an explanation will have to be given. Not that a message gets sent to me to Carabach up to Fitzvillage. No, can't be good enough. The people must now hear what are the specific problems that act as impediments, so that that which we call democracy is now given new life and meaning and purpose. That the folks out there not getting a second-hand message, but they have first-hand understanding. And therefore a minister is compelled to give a good and full accounting. So even if you were in a situation where, and I do not for any stretch of the imagination say that that is the circumstance now, if you were in a situation where you had an incompetent leader of the opposition who was unable really to make any impact on government's process and procedure. The point is that you have 29 other members of the House who are able to make their input on matters that impact on them and impact on the constituents who sent them to this honourable place, Mr. Speaker, sir. I think, sir, that it is important to understand the process. That before, while you could stand and speak repeatedly for 15-minute intervals, And if you think about what the last government did with its majority, they would start with the minister, and then the leader of government business would get up and speak, and then after the leader of government business, another member, and then after that member, another member, and they would make sure that every available hour of the day was taken up by 15 minutes. And Mr. Speaker, sir, you know how it can be. Listen to 15-minute speeches over and over again. And the speaker sometimes might miss 15 or give 20. Not that it will happen too often, sir, but you know it can happen. And then the most unforgettable shot would be that when lunchtime came, you don't do lunch in a brisk and business-like way like this government does, sir, but lunch would be taken for 3 hours. So you go lunch at 12:30, sir, and come back in at 3:30. So you kill half the day, and then you go to dinner early too, you know? That is why they got fat and lazy, and the country grew discontented with that. But Mr. Speaker, sir, the fact of the matter is this, that the business of the House can now be better done by way of people not getting up with a lot of long talk, but sir, making brisk 3-minute interval, you have an interval of 3 minutes, and you have an opportunity to ask 3 or 4 questions that should be pertinent to the affairs at hand. So if it is, for example, sir, that I have a concern, which I do, about the frequency of there being a lack of running water in the northern parts of my constituency, which abut and abound the parish of the constituency of the member for St. Thomas, and we are all in St. Thomas together. Mr. Speaker, sir, then we want to know what is the rationale, why is it happening? What steps are being taken to correct it? When did that process begin? And if it has failed, as clearly it is failing, then what steps are being taken now to rectify? Let us have a full discussion on the matter. But you can only have that, Mr.
Honourable member, you're posing those questions rhetorically? Those are rhetorical questions.
I am just rhetorically doing that now, Mr. Speaker. I'm giving an example, though I glean from your intervention that you too understand how real the question is. But we mustn't anticipate what will come. I don't know what heads will be called. But the point is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that I think that that is yet another example of why this approach becomes more fulsome and purposeful in terms of its potential. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want, therefore, to say that this initiative, like so many others that have come to this House within the last 6-7 months, is one that demonstrates the undying and abiding good faith of this government to continue to hold hands with the people of Barbados in the manner we indicated our intention so to do during the course of the last election campaign. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, that it is a demonstration, in my view, of not only the good intent and good faith of this government, but the ability of its members to continue to work with rapidity and steadfastness towards bringing initiative after initiative that helps us along the road of transforming the landscape of this country and making it a better place for all of us who have to live here. And I honestly and seriously hope, Mr. Speaker, that the day will never dawn when these initiatives aimed at increasing transparency, increasing accountability, increasing the honor and integrity of that which we call public affairs would ever be rolled back by a successive government because it finds itself in a state of inconvenience. Better it is, sir, to go along home than to throw back the stone that has been moved thus far. I am obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable for Christchurch East.
I rise to lend my support for the resolution to adopt this report. Mr. Speaker, I spent some time in the other place. And prior to entering politics, I, like many Barbadians, wondered to myself, what really is the estimates? What is the importance of the estimates? What is the difference between the estimates and the budget, really and truly, in my mind, as a layperson at the time, the estimates seem more like the budget than the budget itself. And the point is, for a lot of Barbadians, both the estimates and the budget have no relevance. People tune in and they hear speeches. As the Attorney General said, they hear colleagues blowing smoke on other colleagues. Colleagues complimenting each other for effectively very excellent political speeches that take us no further in understanding what use is being made of the public purse. We have all watched the estimates debates before. We've all come out at the end of the estimates debates no wiser as to what the actual plan of the government is, where the money is being spent, what it is being spent on, why was money voted last year for a particular matter, let's say to purchase trucks. The same amount is being voted this year as it was voted 2 years ago, and nothing is done, and we keep rolling the figures over. Technology, sir, has perhaps hampered us in the estimates because the invention of the cut and paste has resulted in the same estimates often being spat back out with no apparent change or thought going into it. That was allowed to happen because nobody got a chance to cross-examine, to really delve into the meat of the matter and find out what is going on. Under the previous system, or under the system that obtains now until we do adopt this report and change the standing orders, I believe you used to debate 2 heads, 3 heads perhaps. Parliament would come and sit and spend a week, Mr. Speaker, effectively accomplishing nothing. Nothing. The public was no wiser. What often happened as well, Mr. Speaker, is you had, in the last government, we would have seen ministers get up to speak on certain heads, and it is obvious that the ministers have no clue as to what was in the document in front of them. They had no clue as to what their ministry was purporting to spend money on this year. They had no clue as to what their ministry did with the money that was voted for it the year before. They had no clue. It was an exercise in futility. It was window dressing. It was a waste of time. It's like painting a house that is so riddled by termites that at the end of the day, the only thing holding the house together is the paint that you put on it. And I, before becoming a part of the system that perpetuated this, wondered to myself, what really is the point? When I was given the opportunity to be in the Senate, and the first time I was invited to participate in the estimates, albeit from the position of the Senate, of the other place, I thought, now is my chance to actually understand what I kept seeing on TV and understand the relevance of it. Well, Mr. Speaker, I was in for a surprise, because I was ably assisted by people who had knowledge of the financial affairs of government and accounts and accountability and former PSs. We were helped to prepare for the estimates. But I then found myself paying rapt attention to the estimates in this chamber and being sorely disappointed. We then went to the other place where I got to participate, and I participated once again in an exercise in futility. And I was heartened, Mr. Speaker, when the Honourable Prime Minister indicated that this can't happen anymore. The public of Barbados put us in what may appear to be an enviable position of 30 seats to one party for the first time in the history of Barbados. But with that comes a great responsibility. We have to do what nobody else did before, because we have to now represent not just the government, but we have to responsibly represent what the opposition should have been. So we become our own policemen. We become our own checks and balances, and we could not do it under the previous system. Under the previous system, sir, in all honesty, with a 30-0 majority, under the previous system, there would be no chance for anybody to have any clue as to what was going on. We could hoodwink the public of Barbados forever. We could come and speak pretty about whatever we wanted to. We could have made the estimates debate more of a farce than it actually was. And with our colleagues not asking us any questions, we could pull anything we wanted. But that is not what we want our legacy to be. We were assisted, sir, when my good friend from St. Michael West assumed the mantle of the leader of opposition, of the opposition. So we had one check against 29 balances. It still, sir, under the old system was not enough. So the Prime Minister put her money where her mouth was and said, everything we're doing is transparent. We have had press conferences, we have been totally transparent and accountable. Let us now take it to the estimates. Let us now make the estimates relevant. Let us now make the estimates relevant. Sorry, sir. I have previously said that we debated the estimates in the other place. It was actually the budget, but the point remains the same. The point remains entirely the same. It was really a farcical endeavor. So, Mr. Speaker, no longer, we in the committee, we went through in detail what it is that we wanted to accomplish and how we're going to do it. And I wish to commend the Clerk of Parliament for his research in the preparation report, his assistance in the preparation report, his assistance in the proposed amendments to the standing order that helped to get us to this point. He was the one who had to take the instructions as to where the government wanted this to go and what form we wanted to take, and he had to turn that in to something that we could come before the House in. So I wish to commend him and the staff who supported him. Because on his shoulders was the transformation of how many ever years or decades and generations of doing it the same way. The other thing, sir, in our vision of accountability, we have to be realistic. Corruption doesn't start, well, it starts at the top, but it doesn't stop at the top. Corruption starts at the top and filters all the way down. Perversion starts at the top and filters all the way down. Malfeasance is found across the length and breadth of an organization at every possible level. And I won't say this was necessarily the case in the last administration, but a well-meaning minister may fall victim to what happens in his ministry. For the people who are responsible for preparing estimates, who can pilot their own agenda, and if the minister is not on top of what is going on, he may find himself in the unenviable position of putting forward estimates that have no relevance to his government's policy or what it is that he himself wants to do. So I entirely endorse the opportunity now presented that will see the permanent secretaries of ministries, the technical people, anybody who can lend clarity to the estimates and to help the minister to answer his questions. Further, there's provision in the amendment to the standing orders for questions to be directed to the technical people themselves. So you don't have to filter through the minister the committee, which will be the entire of the parliament, can pose questions directly to the permanent secretary, can pose questions directly to the technical person there to answer on a particular aspect of a particular head. It forces everyone to be on top of what they're proposing as the estimates of expenditure for their ministry. No more cut and paste. You have to be able to explain why the figure, example for the purchase of garbage trucks, is $5,130,000 as opposed to $6 million. Somebody in the well of the house has to be able to provide a satisfactory answer. That is accountability at its highest, and I commend our government for doing it. We have to keep checks and balances on ourselves as well. I have no doubt, and I smile as I speak and I look across at you, Mr. Speaker, but also periodically glance at the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, because he has a heavy burden, this Garung. He has a heavy burden, but also he has a fantastic opportunity. The Leader of the Opposition can pose the hard questions that Barbados wants to have answered, and I encourage you to, through you, Mr. Speaker, I encourage the Leader of Opposition to. I have been forewarned by my friend from St. James North that, sorry, not St. James, I've been forewarned from my friend who just spoke, sir, that St. James Central, that questions are coming as to the water situation in the north, why there are periodic water outages, what is being done. And sir, I would be shivering in my boots at the forewarning, but for the fact that I happen to know that the minister responsible for that, sir, has already presented a report to the cabinet that outlined what the issues, a detailed, in-depth, thoroughly researched report with a solution, a plan, and a timeline that says we know what has happened, we know what we have to do, we know what is required to do what it is that we have to do, and we undertake to do it before the end of the year. So that minister, whoever he be, need not fear. He need not fear, because the answers are there, and while the Cabinet of Barbados has had the benefit of that report, perhaps the public of Barbados has not. So this situation, sir, the new standing orders allow the opportunity as well for the public of Barbados to be informed as to what the ministers are doing on your behalf, and the plans in place or the programs actually in place, and the details of those programs that they otherwise would not have been privy to. So I welcome, sir, I for one, I welcome the opportunity to sit in the well of Parliament, if mine be one of the heads, to sit in the well of Parliament and defend my ministry's position. We have sat down and we have met, and we are not pulling figures out of the air. Everything that is in our estimates is something we can defend and something for which we have a valid plan. And I welcome the opportunity, and I'm sure many of my other colleagues do welcome the opportunity to sit shoulder to shoulder in the trenches with their permanent secretaries, and to sit with their technical officers to defend the programs and plans of their government. At the end of the day, democracy in Barbados is going to be the winner of this exercise. I do, Mr. Speaker, however, wish to put this warning forward out there into the atmosphere and urge the PSs and technical staff to take this as seriously as we, the ministers, are taking it. Because it is not just that your ministers going to be there answering for you, you have to answer for yourself. So this exercise and these new standing orders take us from the realm of futility, sir, to a practical exercise aimed at validating the plans of the government and forcing us to effectively put our money where our mouth is and justify what it is that we are doing. The bottom line, Mr. Speaker, the new standing orders provide relevancy. They provide transparency. They provide accountability. And they force the ministers to have a command of their ministry. And I believe at the end of the day, we all benefit. I also, sir, wish to say that I do appreciate the fact that no minister gets to hide. So although you are a minister and your seat is properly in the other place and you would not otherwise have had a right of audience, whoever you are, if your head is picked, you cannot hide. You have to come and defend your honor. Now, sir, we are setting the framework here. The true relevance of what we are doing here is likely going to be shown down the line at such time that the majority is not what it is now. And there's more of a balance between the government and the opposition. I sit down and think to myself, and this is in no way meant to demean the current opposition, but the fact is 29-1 is not 20-10. And sir, what gives this particular relevance is the thought of exactly what the last estimates would have looked like had this been in play then. Had this been in play then, what would the last estimates have looked like? The last government would not have been able to get away with a lot of what it did. It would not have been able to get away with runaway spending. It would not have been able to get away with not answering questions. It would not have been able to get away with the sort of contractual arrangements they entered into. It would not have been able to get away with the one-sided MOUs with ministers of government signing contracts that cabinet was not privy to and had no cabinet approval. It would not have been able to get away with a lot of what it got away with before. So, being a part of the committee, I wish to commend the Standing Orders Committee for the work done on this. I wish to commend the Honorable Attorney General, who perhaps spoke the shortest he's ever spoken in opening a debate, but he captured everything that was necessary. And, sir, this is a massive step forward. This effectively is another of our transformational initiatives and steps to transform the landscape in Barbados. It is not business as usual. This is now business as business ought to be done. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Parliament for Christchurch East Central.
Mr. Speaker, I am truly excited by these amendments to the standing orders to make the necessary changes to bring a greater level of accountability to the way the public finances are managed. And notwithstanding my position,
Continue, I remember.
Okay. Notwithstanding my position within the Ministry of Finance involved in the process of preparing the estimates, I want to also point out to the House that as we sit here as members of Parliament elected by the people, this provides each and every one of us in this space to question the programs of government, particularly as they affect our constituents across the length and breadth of this country. And so to the extent that there are questions to ministers who in part are colleagues, the reality is that we represent people in this space. and the way that government seeks to spend taxpayers' dollars. That level of accountability is critical for every single member of this House, and I want to assure the honourable member for Christchurch East that irrespective of the composition in terms of representation in this House, I'm sure that each and every member in this chamber would be pretty keen on getting specific answers as it relates to the issues confronting many of our constituents in this country. And this exercise that we are attempting to undertake, whilst it is transformational, it is being done for the first time in the history of this country, I believe that each and every one of us in this space, and as we will go forward, would seek to make sure that we ask the right questions on behalf of our constituents, irrespective of where that constituency may be. Because for too long, sir, our government would have come to this chamber, asked for monies, and to the extent that there's nothing wrong with the process of so doing, what the honourable member for Christchurch East described earlier was clearly a detachment in terms of the society from the process, and certainly what they would have seen being delivered seemingly on their behalf. And I think that this opportunity for this government to begin to re-engage on behalf of Barbadians in a process, yes, once we are preparing the estimates, certainly in the Ministry of Finance, as presented by the various line ministries, I believe it's important, sir, that as this change to the process by which the estimates will be examined and scrutinized, that every single member in this chamber would have that opportunity to pose those questions as it relates to the issues confronting their constituents. And I believe, sir, that is very important, because notwithstanding the overall macro framework that we are responsible for, at the end of the day, sir, if the lives of ordinary Barbadians are not enhanced in some way by the myriad of programs that the government is seeking to execute, then what's the point? And so we now, sir, have a golden opportunity to re-engage and explain that notwithstanding, sir, the financial constraints of government, that certainly as it relates to the Ministry of Finance and how we've sought to bring a level of strategic planning to the execution of programs, that those persons who are responsible, sir, for delivering those programs in government, that they are able to give account, sir, to this Parliament for what has happened within those programs. Because with the best will in the world, sir, as we go about our work as members of Parliament, we engage many of our constituents on a daily basis, sir, and oftentimes there's not enough information flowing from government departments, certainly to MPs, furthermore ministers, such that as we engage with our constituents, we can give them, sir, credible and timely updates with respect to what's happening on the ground. And so therefore, sir, I believe this exercise is important because I too, as a Member of Parliament for Christchurch East Central, would like to know what is the rotation plan with respect to garbage collection in the constituency. Because I believe that's something, sir, that ought to be communicated with the whole of Barbados. But that, sir, I believe is something that is most fundamental and important to what's happening in the country at the moment. And I believe that a clearly articulated plan by those responsible for that agency would be able to at least give some confidence to the public that these things are being taken care of. Now, sir, by the same token, the state of our road network across the country, I think, needs to be explained in terms of what's the plan for execution. Where, when, how, what is required, such that not just this House, but as members of Parliament, that we can go to our constituents and articulate, sir, what would be the response of the various agencies to the issues that are confronting our citizens. And so this exercise is not just about numbers, and the numbers, don't get me wrong, sir, the numbers have to add up. They have to make sense. And we have spent an inordinate amount of time making sure that the numbers make sense. But the execution of the program, sir, under the various heads, within the various ministries, and who is responsible, sir, who is responsible for the implementation, of these programs are critical. And so this report to amend these standing orders, sir, I think is important and critical, because as the Ministry of Finance, we have sought to not just put numbers within programs or sub-programs. We have, throughout this process, on many occasions, sir, sought to make sure that the various agencies that are required to implement any particular program, but certainly those that are a priority for government, that there is cohesion across the government, the total government, such that any particular objective that is needed to be achieved, sir, that it is done in a very strategic manner. And it has been a very painstaking process, sir, because as the member for Christchurch East alluded to earlier, in many instances, we would have observed that, yes, some documents would have been copied and pasted. And so when we question, sir, well, why? And we got into the details, sir, to demand of the public servants within the entire estimates process. We said, well, based on some of the submissions, that isn't necessarily in sync with what the priorities of government should be. Because if we want to make the program successful, given certainly some of the social issues that are confronting the country, some of the economic issues confronting the country, sir, that the way that monies are allocated within the ministry and within the programs, it must be in sync, sir, with the priorities of the overall government. Because at the end of the day, the way that we spend the money and who's responsible for spending that money, sir, that level of accountability now will be brought to bear on the one hand within this parliament by members, sir, asking persons who are responsible for that execution about their own plans and what they have achieved. Because up until now, sir, government has in a sense been a faceless exercise. And the book comes here, there are numbers inside, a few $1,000s here, a few $1 million there inside the book. And then as persons certainly go to engage government, sir, there has never, up until now, been a stage where persons will come to say, this is what we have been able to achieve, sir, within this program, so that it justifies, sir, why the program in the first place should continue, on the one hand, whether or not the program needs to be augmented, sir. And that is the kind of discussion, sir, that I certainly will be bringing from my own perspective as the Member of Parliament for Christchurch East Central, because notwithstanding my responsibility within the context of finance, as a Member of Parliament, I have questions that my constituents are asking me on a daily basis. And I would want to take the opportunity, sir, to put some of those questions directly once the opportunity is given to the various ministers and technical persons, so that the constituents can hear directly, sir, from the persons responsible for executing some of the programs in government, exactly what is the state of play with respect to having their issues resolved. And I think that, sir, is one of the critical things that this exercise will bring to the public. For the public servants themselves, sir, as we've gone through the process in estimates, we've said to them on every occasion that the accountability does not just lie with the 30 of us in this chamber, sir. That as the government and in effect representatives of the people, we must hold them accountable on behalf of the people. And so therefore, as the ones on a daily basis, sir, charged with going about the business of executing the government's policy on behalf of the people, we felt, sir, that it was a responsibility that the senior persons who are responsible, sir, for the day-to-day implementation of programs, that they too come to this place and on the one hand, sir, give the Parliament a level of sensitivity as to what are perhaps some of the issues that they are faced with in terms of implementation. Secondly, give the public, sir, that same level of accountability and sensitivity, so that when we look at just numbers, that the public, and certainly for our own benefit, sir, that we are comfortable with the view that what is being done in a way that certainly befits the policy of government and what the departments are meant to be able to do. Now, sir, I really hope that in this exercise, and I know that obviously the Speaker normally would not participate in these kinds of discussions, but I hope, sir, that an opportunity in that space would be provided such that yourself, sir, speaking on behalf of your own constituents, would be able, within that exercise, sir, that it's something that could be accommodated, because I believe, sir, that every member in this space, in that arrangement, sir, ought to be given that opportunity to be able to put questions on behalf of their constituents. And so I feel it is important, sir, that each and every one of us representing people in this space on these matters, for that period of time that we are undertaking this exercise, that each and every one of us will be given the opportunity, sir, to participate. Because I think that too, sir, that too would be something new. Because we have to demonstrate, I think, to the people, not just that we're doing things new, but we are in effect holding people accountable and giving people the opportunity not just to hear from members or ministers, but certainly from the public servants. And I believe very strongly, sir, that this should be part of the exercise, because up until now, sir, person sitting in that chair would not have had the opportunity to pose specific questions on any specific matter in this space. And I think that as we are going about this process, that this certainly provides an opportunity for certainly your engagement on these matters. And I know, sir, that given your expertise, that I'm sure that your intervention, where possible, if possible, sir, would be of valued addition to the contributions in this chamber. But, sir, we're talking about accountability. And as we have sought to bring the public servants to this realization that they have a responsibility, sir, in helping to shape the perception about government. Because, sir, I can say to you, public servants have worked hard and they continue to work hard. And I think that more often than not, because there's a lack of communication between the public servants and the public, there is a perception that the government as a whole out there, which is, I think, quite unfortunate. But I think this is an opportunity, sir, that public servants who are involved in this process can use the opportunity not just to inform members of the chamber what are some of the issues that they are seeing on a daily basis, but I think it's an opportunity for public servants, sir, once they take it, to be able to communicate to the public in a very fulsome manner about the very programs that they're undertaking. What are the successes that they are seeing in the country, because public servants are citizens too. And I think that this is an opportunity, sir, for certainly all of the technical persons and the permanent secretaries to be able then to, in a sense, sir, give the public greater confidence that the government, the public service, sir, the public service, that they too are in tune and in check with what's happening. And while, sir, you may not be able to get all the money that you want because of circumstances that we are confronted with, the reality is, sir, that people must feel that the government, through not just the minister, not just the 30 of us in here, but certainly the public service, sir, that they are moving with a speed that is befitting the urgency that is required to solve a number of the problems that exist in Barbados today. And I think that opportunities, sir, should not be lost on the public servants. There are some who have never spoken in public on any matter specifically, and certainly when it comes to financial accountability, they certainly will not have spoken on said things, because for the most part, public servants will when they do speak, sir, will speak on technical matters sometimes. But I believe, sir, that this is an opportunity to, in a sense, bridge the gap between the technical matters confronting the ministry as well as the financial accounting that is required. Because as we go through this Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation, sir, we now have to bring the entire population along with us, and this is just part of the puzzle of ensuring that as we seek to raise the level of accountability in Barbados, that those persons who are charged with the responsibility of overseeing the day-to-day management of many of our government departments, that they too get to give, sir, a perspective in this space, and it might very well evolve, sir, but in this space, such that each and every one of us in here, irrespective of the composition, sir, we represent people. And on a daily basis, the government, irrespective of whoever the administration is, the government, sir, is responsible to the people. And I think that this is an opportunity that I think first and foremost gives us as members certainly that clear view that we can ask the questions that our constituents are asking us. And sir, I intend certainly to do that, because notwithstanding the allocation, I believe that there needs to be obviously a reconnection of government, of ministries, of departments with the public, because we are seeing on the ground, sir, on the ground, there's obviously there's a growing level of impatience with the way that the economy was left. We are in the process of rebuilding, and sir, the patience, sir, the patience, and this is CE, sir, the patience, given where we are, we've gained a lot of ground, but I believe, sir, that the public needs to get a better understanding from the public servants, not necessarily from us who are ministers in this space, but from public servants as to precisely what has been the state of play within government itself. Within government. Because the things that I hear, sir, the things that I read, sir, if I say it, people will say, he's a politician. But I think, sir, that this is an opportunity for members, senior members of the public service, not to make any political statement, but in a sense, sir, to give a real accounting as to what is currently the state of the departments on a myriad of issues, such that the delivery of the programs that they are supposed to deliver would have been either successful or not successful. And I believe, sir, that once we're able to do that in this process, that we will start to engender a different level of confidence that will rebuild in the people, in its government in total, because we are going to make sure, sir, that the overall macro positions are reached. But in so doing, sir, it is our intention to make sure, as a government in this place, sir, that the people that we represent, sir, that certainly the priorities that we have placed on making sure that those who are most vulnerable, that the policies and programs that are being executed, sir, are done as effectively and efficiently as possible, given the resources that we have, because at the end of the day, sir, we must, as members of parliament, account to our people. The people that we walk all over this country, sir, to say that we will bring some resolution to their grief, sir, because once we cannot deal with every single issue all at once, I believe, sir, that as we are planning out the execution of the government's program, that the public servants, through the execution of the programs that we have articulated within certainly the estimates, that we then are in a position to make sure that there's greater accountability brought to bear with the public. And sir, so I am excited. I really am excited by the prospect of these changes, because this is something that has been long overdue. And as we seek to usher in a new level of transparency, a new level of accountability, that the governance, or the overall governance framework of this country, I believe, sir, will be improved. This will be the first time that we embark on this in this process, and sir, we will build on it. But I just want to say to this honorable chamber, sir, that having been involved officially in the estimates for the first time as a minister, that strategically this government has sought to make sure that once we meet our overall macroeconomic targets, that the strategic focus with respect to the delivery of government's programming and the allocations of monies as it relates to what we can support at this time and what we can't, given the constraints, sir, that we've looked at it in as strategic a manner as possible. So when we go through this exercise, sir, it gives the public an opportunity to judge us in a real sense on performance by the time we get to the mid-year review as articulated in the Public Finance Management Bill, so that the public, sir, will get the opportunity that when you come and you update, that they can, in a sense, sir, visualize and for themselves what was articulated based on the opportunity they would have gotten from the feedback of public servants, of ministers, and be able then, I think for the first time, sir, to truly judge the government on its performance. And we have said we are prepared to be judged on performance, and on that basis, sir, I fully support the amendments to the standing orders. And sir, I am obliged to you.
Honourable member, you had earlier posed a question, but in relation to the speaker engaging in such a debate, I am so precluded by these standing orders, sir, from engaging in such a debate, so that therefore it perhaps is incumbent therefore of all the ministers, given the fact that I am so precluded, to ensure that the constituents of St. Michael Central are made happy. Given the fact that I'm precluded from so asking, it is therefore incumbent upon the entire cabinet and all the ministers to ensure that the people of St. Michael Central are well looked after. Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise against the background of your comments, and perhaps part of me wonders whether Your Honour is not calling for greater reform of this honourable chamber to ensure that the Speaker does not have to contest the election as in other parliaments across the world. But that is a debate for another occasion and not for today with these standing orders. But, sir, I really could not let this debate pass without recording my views and input and how happy I am. Sir, I joined this Parliament in 1994, September, and it is almost fair to say that in every year virtually since then. A member for St. George North can attest to it. A member for St. Michael North can attest to it. That we spoke of the time that would come that would allow us to align the estimates and the budgetary process as a single event. And we spoke of the need for greater examination of the funds that we spend on behalf of the taxpayers of this country. When, sir, we asked the public to give us the opportunity to govern, I indicated then that it was our view that the public had a right to know how their funds were being expended. Would they agree on every cent that we did? Probably not. But what they must know for sure is how the government that they have elected has chosen to spend their money. And we have also agreed that there are other aspects of our governance of this country that must be laid bare and made available to the public. I regret that it took this government, and I noticed that the press and others didn't even pick it up, but so open have we been on a weekly basis that when we laid before this honorable chamber the two contracts signed by the last Minister of Finance granting to Sandals extraordinary tax concessions, we did that since November. But the process of transparency and openness on its own clearly is not enough to be able to inform the public. And we feel, therefore, sir, that the mere laying of documents does not in and of itself reach the standard that we would want to reach as a government with respect to the kind of discussions and debates that are necessary across the entire country. And therefore, what are we doing with the amendment of these standing orders, sir? Not just seeking to align the budgetary process with the estimates process, such that the advent of a budget in every month except the month of March will no longer be our reality. And March is a month when our estimates of expenditure and revenue have to be concluded. And the most basic thing for any human being is that when you see how much you're earning and how much you are spending, that you have to find a way to know how you're going to bridge the gap. If not, you're going to end up in trouble, as the last government did for 10 years, carrying our debt from $6 billion, to $15 billion, Barbados, because they did not have a plan to close the gap and was printing the equivalent of monopoly money to be able to justify their expenditure. Or you do as we are seeking to do, to have a reasonable sense as to if there is a gap at all, how do you close it, and if there are economic policies that you would wish to put in a coherent and cohesive statement such that people can exploit the economic policies to trigger growth, because growth triggers additional revenue in our economy, since 2/3 of our taxes are in fact transactional and therefore will fuel additional revenue, whether it is import duties, excise taxes, VAT, etc., depend on the volume of activity being generated in the economy. But we feel that it is not just sufficient to do those things. We feel that there must also be granular discussion about the expenditure in the heads and replay what normally happens. That since the early 1970s, when we put a guillotine in place for the debate, which replaced, I'm told by my father, a process that was open-ended, and saw them debating into 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning on a night, and it came to an end because of a test match being played this Saturday, and they realized that this open-ended debate made no sense, and they changed to these new standing orders in 1973. But these new standing orders had a guillotine at 6 o'clock on the Friday evening. such that whatever you were debating, even if you had only debated one head, everything has to come to an end. And the most ministers can do is to stand up and beg to move that their head stamp part and the amount that they're asking for be voted for in this chamber. So you could have the anomalous situation, the regrettable and unacceptable situation that after a whole week, sometimes the public of Barbados, as happened in the last 2-3 years, would only know anything about 2 or 3 heads. And invariably, the discussion became so much of a political soapbox that you really wondered whether you were debating the appropriation bill or not, because it was so obfuscated from what was supposed to be debated. Mr. Speaker, we say no. We say the time has come that in the same way as Minister of Finance, I go through a rigorous examination of what ministers put before me along with their public servants, that this honourable chamber deserves the same benefit as do the people of Barbados. And that ministers must now come, it will be an unaccustomed sight, but must now come in the well of the House, right there. Chairs and a table will have to be placed there in 2 weeks' time. 3 weeks' time, whenever it starts. And the minister will lead off with an opening statement, and the PS and the chief technical officer and other technical persons are there to also answer in the same way. There will be no standing. Members of Parliament will seek the eye of the chairman of committees. The chairman of committees will recognize them. A person will have 3 minutes within which to ask a question and will have the immediate right to 3 supplementaries thereafter. They can come back again, as happened in the old system, where you could speak for 15 minutes multiple times, but you had to stop at 15 minutes. In this instance, 3 minutes cap on each question. The minister or the technical person has up to 5 minutes to respond. Very often responses will be less than 5 minutes. And the rest of us will ask as we go along, and until we go through the different departments of a head and move to the next one. What does the public get to understand? What is happening? Let's take the Office of the Attorney General. The Office of Attorney General this year will be bringing some new matters with respect to the establishment of additional criminal courts. This House will have the opportunity to ask, I don't want to say cross-examine, but it could well be a form of cross-examination. But to ask questions of the Attorney General and his permanent secretary and the Supreme Court Registrar and others on the functioning of the system, the demands on the system, and how the system can be made to work better by reason of the monies that the House is going to vote for them. Secondly, the Attorney General wants to establish and will be establishing, and the bill actually for all of these things without breaching the standing orders of the House is before us for debate later today, for the establishment also of a commercial court. In the elections, the Barbados Labour Party said that one of the things that we have to do better is to manage our court system and the resolution of disputes. You cannot have people going to court and can't get a decision from a court in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Similarly, in the criminal courts, people are waiting cases, jury trials. You know, Mr. Speaker, better than all of us, the length of time and the stress and difficulties that it places not just on the accused, but on witnesses and on families. In respect of commercial matters, on businesses who have to put aside contingent funds and who therefore do not see the most efficacious and efficient use of capital because they have to put it one side in the event that 7 years or 6 years or 5 years from now, a decision is made that goes against them with respect to the resolution of a commercial matter. The Honorable Chamber, sitting as a committee of the whole, will be able to cross-examine and to inquire of the Attorney General the numbers of cases that led him as a matter of policy to be able to persuade the Cabinet and now to persuade the House of Assembly that this merits support. The member for St. Michael East is going to come into this chamber in the estimates and is going to be asking for support in a limited way to get to a platform for the National Botanical Gardens and to allow us to be able to set up a charity that will supplement, because others will say, but the honourable member and minister will know that this amount is not sufficient to run or to develop the botanical gardens sufficiently. He will then be able to explain that the amount there is the seed amount that is necessary to carry it to a certain stage that will attract not just Barbadians returning for 2020 next year to want to sponsor parts of the gardens, but it will also attract Barbadians living here who believe that they can both either through money or through trees or through some other kind of contribution help to make a difference to build the National Botanical Gardens as a national charitable effort. And then those expatriates living on the island who want to participate, who believe that our responsibility to green the world is an individual one, as Mahatma Gandhi stated, that the change begins with me, not with you alone. So that what appears to be not quite making sense to you initially, and you would make a whole speech in here pontificating only to find out 3 hours later the balance of the facts from the minister when the minister intervenes in the debate can now be short-circuited and the facts are immediately available rather than platform speeches based on a tissue of accuracy or tissue of facts and a whole spurious set of speculation, as has been the case for the majority of my time in this honourable chamber with respect to estimates of expenditure and revenue. If there are doubts, as happened a few years ago, as to what was the specific amount under special receipts, as opposition leader, we speculated, and even at the end of the debate, after 5 days, the Minister of Finance never told the Parliament what the money was for and how it got there. And we made the point that if it was dividends, it was in the wrong place, but it was ignored. Now that will not be possible because we are making every minister and every public servant accountable to the people of Barbados for the money which is voted by this House. And that accountability appropriately does not extend only to the political class, but it extends to the public service who are equally responsible. In fact, they are the ones who are financially responsible at the end of the day for the expenditure once voted for by this Parliament and once the policy has been settled by the Cabinet of Barbados and the particular line minister. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to delay the House anymore. This is a major and monumental change in the governance of our nation. And I am happy to lead a government that has the confidence in itself yet again to lay bare itself, lay bare its actions to the people of the country. Do we expect everybody to agree? No. Because it's a democracy and people will have different perspectives, as might the opposition leader. But if we agree on the fundamentals that allow the process to become more transparent, then we feel we have done our duty to the people of Barbados in a way that they have not been a beneficiary of hitherto in an independent Barbados. Similarly, it is the same confidence that allowed us to amend the Central Bank Act and to reduce the overdraft. It is the same confidence that allowed us also to amend the legislation to require this House to have oversight on the issuance of primary securities and to put a ceiling on how much can be issued as 10% of approved expenditure. Mr. Speaker, it is the same confidence that has allowed us to bring a public financial management bill to this House to become part of the laws of this country that increase the level of accountability and require of us not just annual reviews but midterm reviews, and require of every layer, be it state-owned enterprises or ministries or companies in which the government of Barbados is a partial shareholder but majority, the level of accountability to be able to come to this chamber and to be able to lay bare that which we do in the people's names. Mr. Speaker, I would know of no other way to govern this country. And I ask the people of Barbados to recognize that accountability comes not only at the level of the cabinet or the parliament, but we will also require that accountability of every player in this country. Because if we get the levels of accountability across the private sector, across the public sector, within the third sector, in the churches, in the community groups, in the NGOs, and to that end, I hope we will have the legislation that governs the conduct of non-governmental organizations, so you don't get one-man organizations purporting to act in the name of many. If we do these things, believe you me, then not only shall the quality of governance of our country be better, but I want to suggest that the growth and the output that we want to see will come in a bountiful way, because the truth is that transparency and accountability breeds confidence. Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I want to thank the members of this Parliament, particularly those who stood as members of the Standing Orders Committee, yourself, sir, as Chairman, the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, the Honourable Member for St. Michael North, the Honourable Member for St. James Central, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Member for St. Michael South East, the Honourable Member for the City of Bridgetown, the Honourable Member for St. George North, and the Honourable Member for Christchurch South. Let the records of this House record that these honourable gentlemen and ladies have done yeoman service to improve the governance of a Parliament that has been going for in excess of 380 years. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for the City of Bridgetown.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Honourable House be suspended for lunch until 2:30 p.m.
Question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 2:30 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands adjourned until 2:30 p.m. Did until 2:30 and not adjourned.